Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the plenary. I hope you're all fine. I actually thought that the cast will take a little longer, but it looks like everyone was in the same position and you decided really fast. So, which is a good sign because we're talking about unity now. We come to the plenary of transition where we're going to talk about a green economy and social union. So therefore, if to start, it would be cool for all of you to have a seat and to stop chatting and to get your focus on stage because it's an important time we're on soon. Let's have it a little more quiet and everyone takes their seat, please. Yeah, talk to you, all of you. That's right. You all get an A+ here, you're all sitting. You're all doing very well, yes. Yeah. So we might start. We're going up to the a little bit longer. Okay, I got that sign. So it needs to be a little more quiet, I think, when I get that sign. So who's talking, except for me? I see you, I hear you, I tell you. No, I'm not one of those persons. I'm actually a nice person. And I'm really happy to be here, and we're really good in time, and we just have like 4 more hours to go, and then you're all done with all this Congress, so you all did really well. And we have one last input for the next 1.5 hours. And the people are all waiting in line to come on stage. So therefore, I think I might start now. So welcome to the plenary towards a green economy and social union, because I think we all agree that the EU has to go towards a green economy and a social union. And we're talking about it, and we have special guests to come on stage. So I might introduce you to our wonderful moderation, which is Judith Thüringer. She's co-leader of the Green Party in Vienna and city councillor and member of the state government Vienna in Austria. Welcome on stage. Nice to have you. And she will take over and just go through the speakers of the panel before you will introduce them a little longer. So we have Johannes Rauch here, Federal Minister for Social Affairs, Health Care and Consumer Protection from Austria. Please give it up for him. You all know her already, but she's still here. Menali Vogel, co-chair of the European Green Party. We also have Kadi Keng from Circularity Project, Societal Change Management expert, responsible for Business Forum from Estonia. Nice to have you. And last but not least, I hope I pronounce it right, it's Ernest Urtasun. Yes, I got it right. Member of the European Parliament. Nice to have you. And I wish you a successful panel. And yeah, good luck.
So thank you for this beautiful moderation, and I'm very happy and glad to be your host and moderator for this afternoon. I just said to my podium that it's very nice to come into this room. I had today a future Congress of the 9th District of Vienna, and it was very motivating, very inspiring to talk to Greens and also to locals on a district level about the future of Vienna, about the future of the district. And it's very nice to come here to see all these beautiful faces of green people fighting for a just Europe, for a social Europe. And it was very nice to come in here and to feel this beautiful atmosphere. And I'm very happy to be the facilitator of this panel today. My name is Judith Thüringer. I'm the co-leader of the Vienna Greens. And I'm very grateful to host this panel today. We have 1.5 hours, which is a lot and not a lot. But I'm sure we will have a very good discussion, a strong discussion, and you are also invited to put questions to the people on the panel. So, our panel is on just transition and towards a green economy and a social union. So in the next 1.5 hours, we will discuss one of the most pressing issues of our time, because in order to overcome climate change, environmental challenges, the European Union must transition towards a climate-neutral economy on the one hand, and we hopefully all agree that this has to happen in a way that is fair, that is just, and that is socially inclusive for everyone concerned, so for the employers, for the employees, and for all citizens in Europe. So we have many opportunities on the one hand, but we have also many challenges that lie ahead of us, and we still have to find many political solutions for this just transition process. So there are still many questions open about where we start, about where we are going, where we are heading, and what our political agenda must be in order to really achieve a just transition for everybody. So a lot to discuss in the next 1.5 hours, and I'm very thrilled that we will have time to look at various aspects on just transition with the great panelists, and I'm very happy to introduce them to you, and I will start with Mélanie Vogel. So Mélanie Vogel is the co-chair of the European Green Party since June 2022. She's one of the youngest senators in France. So you mean it's easy to be the youngest? Still, you're the youngest, so congratulations on this, yes. And she sits in the Committee for Social Affairs also. Prior to her Senate mandate, she has been working as an advisor for the Green Group in the European Parliament, in the Committee of Constitutional Affairs, and she's an expert in European democracy and also feminism and LGBTIQ+ rights. Very warm welcome, Mélanie. Yes, to my left is Johannes Rauch. Johannes Rauch, he is the Federal Minister of Social Affairs, Healthcare and Consumer Protection in Austria. He began his political career at the Austrian Green Party almost 40 years ago. He was starting in a local town council, and Johannes led the Green Party's parliamentary group in the provincial parliament of Vorarlberg as a chairperson for over 10 years. Johannes is a former social worker, and he relates very closely in his daily work, and I'm very proud to say this, very closely to people's everyday struggles in everyday life, and he really prioritizes social justice, affordable housing, and accessible healthcare for all in his everyday political decision. There's a beautiful saying of Johannes, I quote very often, and this saying is that social work is political work and vice versa. Political work is also social work. A very warm welcome to you, Johannes. On the left is Ernest Urtasun. Yeah, they are all on my left, very good. He's an economist and a diplomat, and since 2014 he's member of the European Parliament, and he's vice president of the Greens and the European Free Alliance. He's coordinator of the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs. Ernest is from Barcelona, and from a very young age he was already active politically with the Young Green Left and the European Green Party. He had a leading role in the writing of the Green Position paper on just transition, and I can only tell you, please read this beautiful paper if you haven't read it. The paper on a transition that works for all the people. Ernest will talk about this, and it's very nice and beautiful to have you here on our panel today. Thank you, Ernest. Last but not least, Kadi Kenk. Kadi Kenk, and it's really very nice, she is in the business of asking complicated questions to inspire the making of difficult political decisions. So she's a societal change management expert. She's a trainer and a consultant for companies and governments alike. And in her advocacy work, she's mainly active in the EU packaging regulation and the global Plastics Treaty. Kadi is board member of Ecopreneur. So Ecopreneur is the European Sustainable Business Federation with member organizations of 7 European countries, including the Responsible Business Forum Estonia and also Austria's Grüne Wirtschaft. Very warm welcome to you, Kadi. So, we will start with our first round of questions for the panel. And I already mentioned, and I will begin with Ernest. Ernest, you worked on this green vision for a just transition in Europe. You worked on this paper, you have written this paper. And my question is, how does this vision of a just transition actually look like? So what are the main challenges and also the main opportunities to achieve this vision of a just transition?
Well, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you. Also to say that, well, the drafting of this paper is really a collective work of our wonderful advisors in the European Parliament, but also different colleagues. I mean, we have Moni and Tom here, but also Tilly and Kira, Wen, all the MEPs that are here with us that helped drafting this paper. Since the beginning of the mandate, we wanted to do that because we have the impression that the Green Deal on its own will not be successful without the strong social dimension. Why is that so? Because it is impossible to move ahead with all the transformative policies that we need to do in all the different fields of energy, transport, without engaging everybody, without having the sufficient democratic backing for it. And for that, you need really to work on a Green Deal that is also social. So that is why we talk about the need to complement the Green Deal with a truly social deal. And also politically, because we cannot forget that we just come from the still very difficult consequences of the last financial crisis, which left very strong bounds in our society with a lot of inequality. So we are building the Green Deal on the basis of an old European social contract that has been broken in several member states in the past. So we need to be aware that if we want the Green Deal to be successful, this needs to be also be fixed. So that is a bit the diagnosis that we made, and that is why we think that this idea of the just transition is absolutely fundamental. So what are the dimensions? Because I don't want to take very long, or you can read the paper. But one thing that for us is very important, firstly, is that all the necessary transformation towards the green economy have a social component. What does it mean? It means that, for instance, when we deploy renewables, we assure that the local communities can profit from the employment that is created. When we need to move and shift certain to other activities, that there is sufficient funding for reskilling and securing jobs for people that will not be able to work in sectors that we know will need to phase out. So all this idea that the transition in key sectors need to be accompanied with social policies and labor policies, not to leave everybody behind. I think this is one particular side of the story that is very important. For that, the European Union has put in place some policies. We have the just transition mechanisms and others, but we in the European Parliament, we believe it's still insufficient. We need much more engagement with that. So this is one question. The second question, which we cannot forget, is that we absolutely need to create better wealth distribution at EU level to reinforce our social system. So all this, and the first dimension I refer to, can only be done if we move to better wealth distribution, and that means, and this is a very important part of the paper that you have in your hands, fixing taxation at the EU. So that is really a key component. So we cannot move ahead with the Green Deal if we don't fix, if we don't make, and this has different dimensions. One dimension is ending the subsidies to the big polluters and making the big polluters pay. This is the more evident. But then we have the whole question of what happens to corporate taxation, to the competition that happens within the EU with corporate taxation, with tax havens. I mean, we really need to work on the income side of our welfare state. And for us, this is also an extremely important component. Thirdly, it's the question of the decent jobs. And here I think it's very important also, I will refer to that maybe later in the debate, but it's important to understand as well that in the last years we have undergone a process in several member states of enlarging precarity. So our growth models have been based in two issues. One is the fossil fuel growth model, and the second one is the job precarity growth model. So both things together has defined our growth in the last years, and both things need to be fixed. We need to phase out from fossil fuels, and we need to phase out from precarious jobs as a source of so-called growth. And for that, it means reverting completely the labor policies that we have done in the past, reinforce social bargaining, increase minimum wage, engage with the unions again, because in my country, for instance, I can tell you in the past we have had policies directly attacking the collective organization of workers, which has been very, very difficult. So I think this issue of decent jobs, and also with another dimension which is very important, which is tackling the new forms of precariousness that we have in our societies. And for instance, at EU level, we are working now in the directive on platform work. Platform work has become a new form of exploitation of several of our citizens in the EU. So these new forms of exploitation, they need to be fixed. So I think this issue of the decent jobs is very important. And last but not least, I will end it here, not to make very long. I think when we talk about just transition, we cannot forget about the global component of what the just transition means. And that means that also in the past, our growth models have been based from the exploitation of natural resources from outside the EU. And now we also need to see, because now we are talking, for instance, about accessing raw materials that are critical for the future economy. What does it mean, accessing raw materials and critical materials from outside the EU for our economy? How does that relate to a global just transition? I think that component is also that this relies, of course, with the responsibilities of the EU at global level, but this component is also very important. So voila, those are some of the main elements, but I'm very happy that we managed to do that document, and I hope you will read it and you will find it interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. Thank you for these main topics we have to address when we really want to talk about the just transition. Thank you also for putting the global perspective into place here. I think this is very important. Coming to a national perspective, Johannes, in Austria, the Greens are in a quite challenging coalition with the Conservative Party, and maybe you can tell us some experiences of being in this coalition. Also tell us about many successes the Green Party in Austria could achieve, especially when it comes to the questions of precariousness, the questions of decent jobs, but also the questions of people who are in poverty or facing social exclusion.
Well, to be in a coalition with the Conservative Party, it's a kind of special adventure. Day by day. And maybe you ask, how is it possible to do a thing like just transition with the Conservative Party? Is it possible? In parts it is. But it's a very tough, and it's a struggle, a daily struggle, you know. So what we have tried to do, we have succeeded in pushing through an eco-social tax reform, and we are able to launch the largest tax relief package of the past decades. So we can say carbon pricing is now just on the agenda. It's a very important step, I guess, on Austria's path towards climate neutrality in 2040. The government has agreed that starting this autumn, climate damaging CO2 emissions will cost 30 euros per ton. Now you can say, why only 30 euros? So it would better been 100 or so, yeah. But on the other hand, 0 will be worst. Though this 30 euros per ton is the starting point, and the prices will increase annually to 55 euros per ton in 2025. And for the first time, a tangible climate protection tool has been integrated to our tax system first. And I can proudly say that this signals a paradigm shift in Austria. And on the other hand, on the social side, it's also a really challenge with the Conservative Party, because they're in a mood, everybody's, it has to do this for its own. And if you are working, you have all the chances in Austria and all that stuff. And if you're out of the labor market, it's your problem, not ours. So social policy is closest to my heart. And I started about 1 year ago as Minister for Health, because the pandemic is just actual in these days. And then I moved to the social minister, because it's very important. And I feel if we aren't able to get an answer to the poverty of population, and we aren't able to answer inflation, upcoming inflation in Austria, the inflation rate is up to 10% over a month. And if we aren't able to give answers, people are losing their jobs or losing their income. We will lose them. And we just wouldn't lose them for our party or for elections. We will lose them as members of the society. And that will become a democratic problem. Because the upcoming far rights in Austria, and you have to know the Austrian far right party, FPÖ, is running for the first place. They are actually in the up to 30%. And we have to get an answer from the left side, I guess. And so if we aren't able to, as Greens in a government, to give social answers, and we try to do that, we spent a lot of money for the pensionists, for people's in the healthcare system. We have taken action on energy prices, energy poverty, housing costs, and food prices, and we spent billions of euros. So we try very hard to give people the impression there is one minister in the whole government, the Minister for Social Affairs, who is fighting for us. And they have to get a feeling there is one guy who's fighting for us, and they try to do that.
I can only say that I can only say that this is the impression many people and especially social organizations, the civil society definitely has. And I think the example of the taxation, the social ecological taxation, as you just mentioned it was really a shift in paradigm. We didn't have a tax like this before, so it really is part of speaking about distribution, about just distribution, and it will be something that will stay. So this is it was in my point of view a very important measure. Yes, we were criticized because it wasn't high enough, but it was like a paradigm shift to actually talk about a new distribution of taxes in Austria. Melanie, from the national level in Austria back to the European level, so from your perspective, where does the political or the institutional structure need to be adapted in order to really ensure that the just transition can take place and will work out for all people, all citizens in Europe?
Yes, thank you for the question. I will answer it, but I think with my answer, I will answer another question that you didn't ask. Because I think this question, what needs to be changed in the institutional structure of the EU in order to make more social policies, it is a good question. We know that we need to reform certain rules at EU level to make it easier, quicker, faster and more efficient to have social policies. For example, everybody knows in this room at least that we need to have more competencies on social issues at the European level. it is not normal that we have more competencies to regulate the internal markets. And we also know that we have to change our decision-making processes, because in some questions related to social affairs, we have unanimity, and that's a problem because everybody knows, we say it all the time, unanimity sucks. So that's clear. Still, I don't think that, at least in the campaign, we should give this easy argument to the people who politically don't want to have better social policies, to say, okay, you know, we cannot really do social policies at EU level because, you know, we don't have the competence, we don't have the budget, we have unanimity, so sorry, it's not our fault. Because I think it's not true. What happened after the COVID crisis showed that when there is political will, we can do it. Of course, we need, and I mean, when we get into power and we have the absolute majority, we will change the treaty, we will end unanimity, we will have more competences, yeah. But until we get there, we can still do a lot of things if political will is there. And I think we have to make clear that most of the time when it's not done, it's because of a lack of political will to do so, and it's because of a national way of seeing the issues. Now, when it comes to how do we link better this issue of environmental policies and social policy, I think sometimes in our narrative we have a problem, because we tend to say, okay, our goal is to do the
sectors that are affected by the end, just to keep their job, whatever it is. So this is for me the first step. This very basic social net needs to be there for everybody to feel secure, not to live and work in fear. This is very fundamental. And the second thing, I think we need to have specific programs for specific sectors on reskilling, on accompanying the transition, but for that, what is very important, I want to go back to that point, cooperation with strong unions. For me, this is very important. The unions have a very important role to play in that. If we really have the governments an alliance with the unions in order to make those workers transit through education to reskilling to other sectors, it can better work. But our policy in several member states in the last year has been systematically to weaken the unions. In France, Macron is trying to weaken the unions. Spain in previous governments has tried to weaken the unions, and that is fundamentally wrong. So that is what I would say. I think having a net that works for everybody, that allows people not to work in fear, and secondly, to accompany sectors that will be affected with concrete policies in cooperation with the unions. I mean, this is more complex than that, but I think those are two dimensions that I think are very important.
Melanie.
Yes. Thank you. Well, first of all, I think the example of Horace, that if you ask a person, what do you prefer between keeping your job, even though you know it's going to be bad after a while, or a just transition, the person answers, I prefer to keep my job. I think it just shows also why we need states, parliament, democracy to make policies, because then policies drive the reality. If you just let it to individual decisions, well, we know that, okay, it's not going to work. So that's also why we're here, to design policies. Still, how do you convince, how do you make this a positive perspective for people? The first thing that I wanted to say is exactly what Ernest said. You need to have concrete solutions that people believe in are going to work if they are negatively affected. And for example, the fact that you will get a good unemployment scheme when you are part of certain sectors, these things are key. The other thing that I wanted to say, in the French Senate, I worked on a report on green social security. So it's an opposition right to build special committees or inquiry committee on topics. The other groups, they cannot say yes or no, they just have to accept. So when it was the turn of the Greens, we say we want to work on the green social security. And then the other groups were like, okay, but what the fuck is this? We cannot send any member to your committee because we don't understand the topic. What is this? And actually, so the idea was to say, okay, we have a social protection system, how to make it resilient to climate change, And how, because of course the risk that our social protection system was designed to cover were different from the risk that is on the society because of climate change, which is a much bigger risk. And then our social security system cannot do it. And also the way it's financed and the way it's organized. And we came up to different, and then they understood the problem. And then we came up to different solutions, working more on prevention, etc. But also this idea that I think is also a source of trust that you can build in people if they see, okay, that's something that could impact my life, I could use it, and it could be positive. It was this idea of having that the social security could offer universal allowance for healthy food. So we know that access to healthy food is one of the biggest determinants of social injustices and of public health, because if you're more vulnerable, you don't have access to healthy food, and then you get more sick, and then and the fact, so there are different models for this, but this is the thing, if you tell people, okay, our social model is going to give you the right to have access to healthy food. There are different solutions with social security card, you can buy food in organic shops, there are different models. But then with a tool like this, first of all, you offer a new right, something that is positive, that people are going to use, and also you accelerate the transition, because then, I mean, we calculated this, you can read the report, it's 300 pages if you have nothing to do, but you accelerate the agriculture transition, because then you offer possibilities for farmers to sell their goods, etc. And it's a virtuous tool based on the principle of social security that is actually helping the green transition, without telling people we are doing this for the green transition. We are giving them something that is good for them, and they are not going to use it for the transition, they're going to use them for themselves, and then it's going to have a positive impact on the economy.
Thank you. Thank you for this example on green social security. I think that's very interesting, also the way you describe how to have a virtuous circle instead of a vicious circle. I think it's a very beautiful example. There's one more question in the first row, but first Johannes also wants to talk, I think, about this question of social security and
just
the
a
labor
few
market.
words on another topic on the labor market, because we have a problem. I guess not almost in Austria or in all member states. As we all know, we live in an aging society, and in Austria alone, we will need about 80,000 additional workers in the care system, in the care sector, by 2030. 80,000 plus. And we aren't able to get them on the labor market in Austria. It's completely impossible. So we definitely need immigration. That's the point. And the last 15 years, the Austrian policy, especially from the conservatives and the far-right parties, the message was everything that comes from outside is evil and threatening and dangerous. And that's completely stupid. That's completely stupid. It's absurd. It's damaging us as a society. So we have to change our words. We have to say, you're welcome here. We give you good working conditions. We need you. And if we aren't able, as European Union, as the member states of the European Union, to do a good and fair immigration policy, we lose. We aren't able to do our labor market challenges in the future, in the next 10 to 20 years, especially in the care and the health system.
Thank you for this addition, Johannes. And I think there is another question in the first row.
Okay, that's better. My name's Catherine. I'm from Green Party of England and Wales. I just want to thank you for supporting a very strong statement on the UK's illegal immigration bill. So my question is directly related to that. And to Melanie, your point about there's different versions of Planet A that we could create. And one of those versions is a Europe that is a fortress, that says, we have a safety net, we are okay, you are, we create solutions for ourselves. I'm glad you just brought up migration, but it's not just about our labour markets. How do we create a system where the social net is resilient and able to cope with people who are not just coming to work, but people who need asylum, who need refuge from particularly the changes that are being wrought on climate across the world? And so how do we create societies that accept that or trust that that social net is strong enough and wide enough to bring those people in? Thank you.
Melanie, maybe? Melanie, maybe? Okay, Kari wants to say.
I think I'll just give a short first is that how is a complicated question. Sure, we can start developing this, but yes, the more important part is saying we agree that yes, we are going to provide that. We need to do this. It's necessary. Because from private sector side, you'd look at the economic sector and the economists and analysts who would say the green transition is basically a violation of human rights, because look what you're doing to these people. You're going to be putting them out of jobs. You're going to make it really expensive for them to live or survive, or you're taking away their lousy jobs that we're enabling with our lousy consumption behavior, right? Of saying, it's not perfect, but at least it's there. And this way, neglecting completely that the government does have a role in making sure that when we have a transition and some people are being left behind, they are taken care of. This is something companies have never done, and they will never do voluntarily. Or let's say some do, our members do, but not all. And you can't imagine that this is how they establish themselves. So it's like, first the question is making sure, yes, that is what we want to achieve. We want to make sure that this net is there, but then how, that this is something maybe other panelists want to touch upon.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So basically on the link between migration policy and social justice, and how can we make sure that our social system integrates rightly and fairly migrants. I think the blockage to this is not in our social systems. There is no problem with migrants when it comes to our social systems. This is something that is pure. The problem in this debate doesn't come from a technical solution to implement in our social system. Our social system actually benefiting from migrants. The problem we have, I think, it's a completely different one, is the space we give to the far right in the public debate. That's the problem we have, and we have it all around Europe. And then we give the space in public media to people who are going to explain you that all the problems in your life and all the social insecurity you have, it doesn't come from the wrong decision that we are doing, it comes from the migrants. And it's just a lie. And it's just if you give more and more space to these ideas, it works. But actually, the policies we are building when it comes to migration and social policies, they are irrational. We are benefiting, and it's not even the reason why we should be in favor of giving migrants fundamental rights, and we should do this anyway, whether it would be beneficial or not for the economy. But it's just a fact that we are losing public money because we don't give proper workers' rights to migrants. It's an irrational position just for populistic reasons. And the calculation we have, at least in France, is massive. Like what we would gain in terms of public money if just we would give legal status to migrants and the right to work and the right to have access to social security, it's massive. And I wanted to say something else, and I totally forgot, so I'm going to...
Okay.
I'm going to end here.
Yeah, yes, it will come again, and we have another question here in the 6th row in the middle. Yes.
Rodica Bărbuță from Green Party Romania. We speak here about green transition and reskilling, but I think we need to not forget that Hasher people and company see the person over 40, 45 years at like undesirable to give jobs, even they are reskilling, and especially if they are new in the job. So it's a problem in Romania and must be a problem everywhere, and this problem must be addressed. How we train Hasher people and managers to not see people in middle ages like not good to be employed. And the second, the examples of public policy here are very important, but to manage our fears of people, how we will look the transition for him, we need models that can be seen how the people in other countries or in other regions made this transition and was beneficially. Maybe television, green television with movies will serve to lower the fears.
Thank you very much for this contribution, and I'm very happy that you bring in the Romanian perspective here. And I just wanted to remind you, like 2 days ago, we had the ZERT round here in Vienna, so the Central European Round Table. And I'm very happy that Moni Vana is here, who is the founder of ZERT, and bravo. And because of Moni Vana's initiative, we succeeded in like every year hosting this Central European Roundtable for the Greens. And it was so impressive for me to take part in this ZERT and also to put this social agenda and the question of the social union that is now so in the middle of our discussion. And that's what I really like, that we are talking about transition and we land at these basic questions of social security. And I think that is very beautiful. But back to also go with us within this green transition, how we employ also vulnerable people and how we bring employers to actually take the fears of the employees also. Maybe Kadi or maybe Ernest?
Yeah, I'll answer from the company side. Oh, our employers need so much educating in so many issues when it's in green transition. This question was related to green transition, but in general, social really, because our employers don't know what kind of skills they need. They don't even know that they lack them. And this is because the way how business has been done is learned by businesses that already operate, by the way how we teach business in school, etc. So the kind of new programs on what a sustainable business is only to come. It's not there yet. And it's only, step by step we have these initiatives with mini nano degrees in universities and something where you have ESG leaders and it's going there, but the values are they come from somewhere else, so it might be a long transition, but it's important to understand that the lack of knowledge of what you really miss or what you need is it's out there anyways. The good part about the having to understand what's your impact to workforce comes with the corporate sustainable CSRD, sorry, corporate social responsibility standards and directive, where at least major and large companies have to start measuring and managing the impact they have to their own labor force, and publish it and make it so that government can also make you accountable for whether you're actually engaging, supporting us in this transition, being able to engage the necessary workforce, of making sure that the way how you do business also helps out the government in its own other endeavors. So it's more, let's saying that we have one problem or two. We have many problems, let's just agree there's many things to solve, but the question is going step by step, starting with those who want, and then sharing the best practice. So that's one of the reasons why Ecopreneur has been established, and one thing that we do, that you can come in there and see, hey, it's actually possible to be green and profitable. So, and not only green, but also socially just.
Thank you. We are nearly out of time, and I see many more questions, and I didn't look at you before? Okay, so then I take one last question, and you have to make your closing statement very, very short. So one last question here in the third row, and then we come to our closing statements because we're nearly out of time already.
We were talking about just transition and green economy, but I was wondering how would that work for countries where we get our resources from? So, for example, for solar panels or electrification of cars, electric batteries, we get our resources, for example, in Africa, which then are destabilized. So I'm really happy we're talking about a just transition, social union, green economy. But for who is it just? Just for us here in Europe, or is it supposed to be just as well for them and other countries? And if so, how are we going to get there? Because I don't see that yet. So I was wondering what your answers would be on that.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing in this global perspective and this question of for who is it just? Who wants to answer this question? Ernest.
No, I think this is a fundamental question. I mentioned briefly the issue among my introductory points, because let's take mining, which is probably the issue you referred. There's a mining fever now because we need to access materials. And one thing we firstly need to realize is that with this issue of the accession of materials, we need to forget that we are going to build a green economy which will basically transform all kinds of activities that we now do into activities that will work without emissions and with electricity. This will simply not work. Forget about having enough lithium to replace all the combustion engines with electric cars. It's simply impossible. Also because otherwise we will need to engage in a global war for lithium access with other superpowers. I mean, this is crazy. It's crazy. It cannot be organized like that. Unfortunately, it is a bit, and that's why I mentioned the Critical Raw Materials Act that the EU is debating at the moment. We need to be extremely careful with that. I think that we cannot imagine a situation where the most developed economies do their transition on the back of poor economies that will be providing the raw materials for this to happen. So yes, indeed, this transition that is globally just, I think this is key. And we as Greens, we need absolutely to fight for that. We cannot accept, for instance, that we are going to exploit completely the resources of third countries without for our own transition, without taking our own share of responsibility. So I think this is a key element, absolutely.
Okay, so we've nearly come to an end, and I want to come back to all of you with a closing statement of you as panelists. And maybe to make it really short and on point, I want to ask you if there was one single action or one single measure to push the green transition to just transition agenda forward. What would it be? What would you pick if you could decide tomorrow on this one measure? What would you choose? And maybe you wrap it up also in your final closing statement. And maybe we start with Johannes and we go all the way along the podium.
So I try to do it in 1 minute. In a situation with upcoming far-right parties all over Europe, having a debate, Europe is a failed project from the far-right parties. We have to fight for this European Union and for a better European Union. And there's no alternative, I say. So if we have the idea, the far rights have the idea, we can solve the problems, the upcoming and the existing problems on a nationwide level. It's stupid, and we have to name that's stupid. It's no way to do it on a nationwide level. So let's fight for a strong European Union, for a solidarity in European Union. Otherwise, we are losing everything, our freedom, our way of life, and our way to life as a society we imagine that must be like a transition, just transition, solidarity. Thank you.
Melanie.
Of course, one thing is difficult to pick, but I would say, as we know that today the biggest threat to the green transition and to social justice, to keeping the EU, which means to keeping European democracy alive, is this convergence that we see more and more in more and more countries, and also at European level, between the conservatives, the liberals, and the far right. And we have seen this last week in Spain, where really the campaign against our ideas was really the main thing of the campaign, going against all social measures and green measures that are actually necessary. So if there was one thing I could say, I could do, would be to win the Spanish election on the 23rd of July. And I'm asking you, because this is really about our common future, I'm asking you, if you can, to support with all your hearts our Spanish friends to win these elections, because if they don't, I don't know where we're going to go together. So help the French as well, the Spanish, to win the elections.
In short, I make everyone accountable for their role, and that means a government should be the one opening doors for companies that go for green transition, and on the other hand, make sure that everyone left behind are in a good place. At the same time, both the companies and policymakers being responsible for supporting and collaborating with a strong civil society, who is there always to be one step ahead of them, their best partner, but also critic, and then making sure that the individuals inside the system are not held accountable for everything being left undone by the prior three that I mentioned. Thank you.
Maybe just Melanie reminded me about this campaign that happened in France